Hello, welcome to this video about the AQA GCSE English Language Paper 1. My name is Miss Kilbenbond and I work with all the English teachers across the Athelstan Trust. This is the fifth video of 5 videos about this paper. So this particular video is going to concentrate on section B, which is the writing section. If you have not watched the other 4 videos and you're interested in the whole paper, then you need to go back to find those 1 to 4, looking at questions 1 to 4, and all of the videos have got the same objectives: to understand the overall format of the GCSE English Language Paper 1, to revise the priorities for each question, and help you to develop a strategy that you can apply to each answer. So this video will hopefully give you some strategies that you can then always use when you're faced with question 5. So what you can see on the screen now is the extract that you would have been working with in the reading section, questions 1 to 4. What the examiners always do is they will pull out something from the theme of the reading, of the source that you've had to read, and that will influence what you're going to be asked to write about. And what their examiners would say is that they hope that reading and answering about something similar will help give you inspiration and ideas for your writing section. There's actually nothing stopping you doing the writing section first. Some schools advise that for particular types of students. It's a decision that you need to make or listen to your teacher's advice on, but that's why I've included this reading slide in this video, in case you did want to pause and read it to give yourself some inspiration. But let's move on and look then at question 5. So this is worth 50% of the overall mark for paper 1. It cannot be ignored. It's a really important question that you are going to need to spend half of your time on. And on the subject of time, you should leave 45 minutes for question 5, but you shouldn't be writing for all of those 45 minutes. Planning is the most important thing that you can do to prepare for question 5, and I'm going to give you some ideas in a minute about how you can use that time wisely. Somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes would be ideal planning time. And at the end of your writing, really important to give yourself time to proofread. This is a part of your exam where spelling and punctuation and grammar and using varied sentence structure and the quality of your vocabulary choices are all going to influence your final mark. So it really is important that, as well as that planning time, you do spend time reviewing what you've written and thinking about how you can make any edits and improvements and tweaks. So question 5, you will get a choice of which question you answer. You do not have to answer both, you choose one question. Usually you can choose between a description and a narrative, but it's important to say that there is no guarantee that the exam board won't put in 2 descriptions or 2 narratives. All they're promising is that you're going to be given a choice of task. One of those will be linked to an image, a picture. What's important about the picture is it's there to inspire you, it's not there to constrain you. And what that means is you don't have to describe exactly what you see in the picture. You can use the picture as a prompt from which you might write about something that's got some kind of link to the picture but isn't exactly the same, and that is okay. So on this particular paper, for our section B, we've got either write a description of the sea as suggested by this picture, or write a story about a life-changing journey. So a description that's inspired by that picture but doesn't have to be exactly what you're seeing there, or a narrative, a story about a life-changing journey. And that life-changing journey could be real, it could be your own experience, or it could be totally fictional, it could be fantastical, it could be in any genre that you enjoy writing in. It's difficult to give advice about which one you choose. It's a really personal choice, and quite often just one of them will speak to you in the exam. You'll just know that that's the one that you've got the best idea for. Sometimes a student has a really strong preference for one type of writing over the other. That has to be a decision that you make personally, I think. You just need to make sure you're clear about the difference between a description and a narrative. A description isn't an entire story. A description is simply trying to create through words a sense of setting or atmosphere. A story is a narrative that often has characters and has some sense of something happening. So let's start looking at the description. Write a description of the sea as suggested by this picture. So what would be a good thing to do when faced with this picture if that's what you've decided to do? Well, planning is absolutely essential, and a mind map is often the best way to plan. Some students actually write on the picture itself, they find that helpful. Some students use part of their exam paper to find some way of planning out some rough ideas. My advice to you about question 5 is to make sure that you think in terms of the camera and the 5 senses, so those images in the top left and the top right corner, and I'll explain that to you now. Along the bottom of the screen you can see different types of camera angles: a wide angle shot, a zoom in, an extreme close-up, a panning around, so moving the camera around to something else, and then a return to a wide angle shot like you had at the beginning. If you're describing a setting, that can be a really effective way of planning your paragraphs. Imagine that you're standing in that picture somewhere. Maybe you're standing behind this woman on the beach. Maybe you're in a boat looking onto the beach. Maybe you're standing up on a cliff looking down at the beach. Maybe you are a fish in the sea by that beach, who knows. Maybe you are that actual woman standing on the beach. Maybe you're inside her mind. You start with your wide angle shot. You start with the bigger picture, the big scene. What can you see? Then you zoom in your next paragraph to something and look at it a little bit more closely. Then maybe you do an extreme close-up where you look at something in really fine detail. Then you move the camera around to something else that's caught your attention, and then at the end, to give it a really nice structure, you return to that wide angle shot where maybe something's changed. It might be the weather's changed, it might be something has moved or disappeared. You don't have to do this. It's a suggestion for any of you who find not really knowing how to start difficult. I have often found that using this idea of having that camera and moving through those shots can be really helpful for students in their planning. You could mix that up a bit. You could start with the extreme close-up rather than the wide angle. You could put those words in any order you like, really. But thinking about how the beginning and the end link together is quite a nice little tip. As for the 5 senses, then not just concentrating on what you can see will give you a lot more to write about in a description. So just making sure that you've considered all those other senses, the sound, the smell, the taste, the touch, and you don't go through them like they're a list, because your writing might sound a little bit staged and not very natural, but just thinking about them to help you plan is a good idea. And that was a very quick guide through how you might approach a description. We're going to now do a very quick guide through how you might approach the narrative. So if you chose to write the story about a life-changing journey, then you're committing to writing something that needs to have some sort of structure. And this roller coaster structure that you can see on the screen now is often used as a way of supporting people to write a story, because lots of stories will follow this roller coaster pattern. You start with the setup, what's happening at the start of the story, quietly setting the scene, introducing the main character. Then there's an inciting incident, something that happens that leads to the rising action, the roller coaster going up the hill, things starting to get more tense, more scary, more worrying, more exciting. The climax is the moment in the story where often there's a moment of danger or upset or tragedy, or it could be of high excitement. And then the falling action is how that gets sorted out before you get to the end of the story, where usually things are calm and happy again. Now you'll have noticed that that story is quite traditional in that it suggests that we're going to end up with a happy ending or things being sort of sorted out. You can mess around with this roller coaster shape. A lot of writers will start with the climax. You start at the top of the roller coaster and you immediately kind of fall down into something that explains how you got to the top of that roller coaster. So be brave about playing with that structure, but that might just help you to think about how stories work. If you find it really difficult to know how to start a narrative, I listened to an author a long time ago now talking to students about how he started a story, and I've remembered some of that and tried to turn it into my own strategy that you might find helpful. So here's a way that you could approach planning your narrative. Step 1, turn an idea into just one sentence and write that sentence down. And it could be the most simplistic idea, the most simplistic sentence ever, and that's okay. So, a life-changing journey. I've gone for something a bit silly. Hedgehog crosses road. There's my life-changing journey. So I've written that down as just one sentence. Step 2, you then put that sentence in the centre of a mind map, and it only takes a couple of minutes. You start firing questions at that sentence. So questions like, well, what kind of genre of story is this? Is it science fiction? Is it something that's fantastical? Is it something that's more emotional, more adventurous? Am I writing from the hedgehog's perspective, or am I going to use the idea of an omniscient third-person narrator who can sort of see what that hedgehog's thinking? Why is the hedgehog trying to cross the road anyway? Where's he or she come from? Where's he or she going? What's going to be on the other side of the road? Is the hedgehog travelling alone? Is the hedgehog frightened? Why is this journey going to be life-changing? Is traffic the only danger, or is something else going on? Does the hedgehog have extraordinary powers? Maybe this isn't a normal hedgehog like we might all be thinking of. So it sounds like a silly idea, and it sort of is to get your attention, I suppose, but hopefully you can see if you fire all those questions at your sentence, and around your sentence you start to jot down the answers or your ideas, you quickly start to get a feeling for your narrative. So then you can get to step 3, where you use those answers to think about a story map. And you can use or abuse that roller coaster idea at this point. You can stick to that very safe setup, inciting incident, moving up to your climax, etc. Or you can twist it and do something a little bit different. So I've got 2 examples for you to show how you could perhaps use that simple sentence where we started with the hedgehog and turn them into 2 short stories. So here's idea 1. This is a straightforward adventure story, if you like. We start off with the traditional setup. I'm going to describe a hedgehog happily living in an overgrown front garden home where they feel safe and secure. The inciting incident will be that the house has been sold and the new owners decide to start work on that overgrown garden. The rising action, that perhaps those new owners are getting out hedge trimmers and lawn mowers, and the hedgehog's life and home is suddenly at risk. The only option, the only way out of that front garden is to cross the road where there's a safer wasteland area over the other side of the road. The climax would be as the hedgehog gets into the road, the speeding cars that are approaching mid the hedgehog being in that road crossing, and it's unclear to the reader. There's a moment where we think the hedgehog might not make it. The falling action will be the relief when the car somehow misses the hedgehog, or the hedgehog doesn't fall into a deep puddle. And then the resolution would be that the hedgehog safely arrives at the other side. That's quite a standard sort of happy ending story. Or we could do something really different with that same initial sentence, hedgehog crosses road. So what about this one? So this time we've got a science fiction take on our hedgehog crossing the road. We're going to start not with the nice neat setup that's going to bring us to a happy ending eventually. We're going to mess around with our roller coaster shape, and we're going to start with the climax. So we're going to start with the speeding car, the headlights approaching the hedgehog that's crossing the road, and as the reader we're going to immediately assume that this is going to be a story about a very normal hedgehog who's in danger because of this car, perhaps likely to be injured or killed. Then we're going to move to the inciting incident. So we're almost going to go back in time and find out why that hedgehog was crossing the road. And at this point, I'm going to add a little bit of intrigue. The hedgehog was returning to base, but we're not really sure what that means, to refuel and take new orders. So it's becoming clear at this point that this hedgehog doesn't seem to be living a normal hedgehog life. Then I'm going to move to the rising action. The narrative switch is now not going to be on the hedgehog, but as the reader we're going to be inside that car, and we're going to be seeing the story now from the perspective of the people travelling inside the car, who suddenly in their headlights pick up this giant terrifying shape that perhaps leads to them hitting the brakes. Then we're going to go to the falling action. There's going to be the dramatic car crash that leaves a hedgehog unharmed. The resolution is going to reveal that the radio continues to play in the crashed car, and the news report that's playing out through the windows of this crashed car is a headline story about mutant animals, so these giant mutant animals that are leading some kind of revolution in a sort of sci-fi dramatic gasp ending. So you can see there two ways in which you could turn that title, that question 5 narrative title, into a story that could work as a short story. And the best thing you can do to be able to write like this is to read widely, read as many stories as you can. Reading short stories will help you with this idea of what you can do quickly. If you don't read stories, if you're not used to how stories work, it's so much more difficult for you to write a clever story yourself. So that would be my advice to you about revising for this question. And that brings us to the end of this video. So it also brings us to the end of the 5 videos about paper 1. I really hope that you found it helpful, and the fact that it's been based on that sort of children's book has actually meant it's been easier to access. You then should be able to apply all of these strategies to any extract that comes up in your exam. So hopefully you've got an understanding of the overall format of the whole paper, with timings on each question if you've watched all 5 videos, that you've revised the priorities for each question, what it is that you're needing to show the examiner that you can do. And finally and importantly, for each question, I've given you a clear strategy that you can then apply to answer that question. So I hope that helps. Good luck. Thanks for listening. Bye.